Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
My name is Eric, and I'm returning to True Form with Michael Kester.
No, it's double feature.
I don't know what that means. True Form is not the name of the show. Is that where you were?
Sorry.
Oh, Jesus. We have 2 movies on the show that we promised to get back around
Yeah,
to.
and honestly, I forgot, and then I just thought we weren't going to do it.
Oh, I remembered.
I got a couple emails.
Yeah, there were some emails. So this is great. So tell me what these 2 movies are.
Today we're doing For a Few Dollars More and Gamera, Guardian of the Universe.
So we did a show that was A Fistful of Dollars and Gojira.
Yes.
Which fit much better in your iTunes. You came up with this master plan on that show that we could do, these other phases of kaiju with the other Leone stuff.
Right.
And we both said, great idea. In fact, I believe at the time we said, great idea. Let's try and cram that into this year.
Right.
And that just never happened. But that was early in year 3. And this is toward the end of year 4. And we managed to sneak it in. So although it seems like it's been an absurdly long time,
right?
When you technically look at the different series of the show we have, we fit it into the next year.
Yeah. So it's
Beautiful.
not our fault. We've done a great job, and we're stellar hosts of Double Feature.
So there's going to be spoilers in this show, and then you're going to think we're not doing a great job because we ruined movies for you. So as light on spoilers as a show like For a Few Dollars More and Gamera, Guardian of the Universe might actually be, as you like to point out, everything can in fact be spoiled.
That's true.
So how do you not want to watch these? This sounds like a great use of an afternoon.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
In fact, we watched them, and it was a great use of an afternoon. Why don't we start the same way we did last time with For a Few Dollars More? This is perfect because I was so in the mood for a Western today.
Yeah.
I always forget I'm in the mood to watch spaghetti Westerns.
Yeah.
And they start, but this was a rare occasion where I showed up in the studio today and I desperately wanted to see a spaghetti Western. And this was just perfect for it. So this is the second one in the Dollars trilogy.
Right. The Man with No Name trilogy.
The so-called Man with No Name trilogy, although we'll dispel that even further this time around, which is Clint Eastwood, right?
Right.
It's the Clint Eastwood that isn't Dirty Harry. But once again, he's not actually the man with no name here.
No.
He is, I think it's Manco.
The man with Manco name.
I mean, it's so poorly dubbed. The English is just terrible. But they obviously call him Manco. This isn't a big secret. Oh, look, I found a character accidentally said his... No, I mean, they call him Manco. It's, pretty widely known. It's translates to, it's something about his one arm, right? It's what you would say about someone who only can use one arm. And he does everything with one arm and gunslings with his other arm, which I don't know how that helps him build up muscle and reflexes, but it's probably why Mortimer is ultimately a better and faster shot. Well, we'll get to that, though. So this is another interesting litigious movie for Sergio Leone.
Yeah.
He gets together with Clint Eastwood, and he creates the original Fistful of Dollars with their producer at the time. And we talked about the Dollars trilogy and the legality and Yojimbo and all of that stuff on the first one. So I'm not going to mention anything from the first one. You can go back to that show, Fistful of Dollars and Gojira. So the producer and Sergio Leone, after the first movie, have this big falling out, right? He separates, Leone does, and he decides, I'm going to do another one of these movies. And then, of course, the producer sues him because the producer says, oh, that's the man with no name or whatever. That's Joe. That's my character. I should get some of this money. And so Leone does the same fucking thing he did for Yojimbo. He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not the same character.
Yeah.
This is a totally different guy. And so they take him to court, and the court decides, when you read about their decision, ultimately what they came to is that, the character's kind of a public domain. He's a legend. Which is really funny, public domain. It sounds like, in my head, I see the court with 2 children arguing over whose character it is, and the court just kind of goes, I don't know what you're talking about. It's just some guy with a poncho. This could be anybody.
This is a
Doesn't
cowboy.
even matter. Yeah.
You're not allowed to trademark a cowboy.
Yeah, they basically said your character is so flat and so cliche that he's public domain.
I'm sorry, your peg leg, eye patch, bearded pirate cannot be copyrighted.
Right. It's Jack Sparrow being copywritten, right? But I mean, that seems so cruel too. I don't think this character is such a cliche. And even if he is, it's only because they, you know, popularized. I mean, it's the fucking Dollars trilogy. You know, it's the most popular of its kind. But it does kind of add to that weird Django thing where characters sort of public domain. Everybody just kind of does the same Western thing. And then the title almost becomes a jab at the previous, for a few dollars more.
Right.
It's a joke. It says, hey, we won. We're going to capitalize on that thing and fuck you guys. So Joe, you like that? I'm going to call him Joe now. That's
Joe,
fine.
Yeah.
Joe comes back in true form. He's shooting Mortimer's hat around.
Shooting apples off trees.
I know, right?
Yeah. No, the hat shooting scene.
The hat shooting's the best because they're just fucking children.
Yeah.
You know, it's go pick up your hat, shoot it, flies away.
Fine. I will go pick up my hat.
Yeah, right. Up, shot it again, flew away.
Fine. I'm going to pick it up and then I'm going to shoot your hat all at once and show you that I'm just as good.
Take that, asshole.
Don't
it's a
be
pissing
a baby.
contest. That's exactly what it is. That's one of my favorite scenes in this, though, for as much as it takes these characters that I like to think are strong, manly men and then goes, oh, they're being silly. I love the nighttime shot, and it just seems like it would have been fun to film that day. And you just have these two characters. I mean, when you have characters like this and actors like this, you just have them shooting each other's hats.
Sure.
And that's fine. You watch that.
Yeah. Well, I think my favorite part of the movie is just the whole section right at the beginning when you first get to know Mortimer. You get to know Lee Van Cleef.
Sure.
As this fucking cat-eyed guy who is just out for bounty. And he just walks up, takes the poster. Everybody makes jokes. Haha, this is just a normal... Oh.
Yeah.
This is a serious human being.
There's a new sheriff in town.
Right.
That's what that scene is.
Sure, and it ends with the thing we saw in Sukiyaki Western Django. They took it from this. I'm not trying to credit them with somehow retroactively. But the
wouldn't
rifle
be the first time on the show, I think.
On the revolver.
Oh yeah. You put a rifle butt on your 6-shooter. It's ridiculous. He has these weapons that are super iconic too. You know, Mortimer is one of the reasons I love this movie so much. He's a part that ultimately was played by Lee Van Cleef, but they considered a lot of weird people for this role.
Okay.
Charles Bronson was, people you might kind of expect in this.
Sure. Well,
right?
Charles Bronson was in Once Upon a Time in the West. He worked with Leone there, so I guess that makes sense.
Well, and Lee Marvin, Henry Fonda at one point was considered for this. But Lee Van Cleef, we talked about him a tiny bit on the show when we talked about Escape from New York.
Right.
And, this was the movie that I had known him from. He also did High Noon. That was another one of his big ones. Early, if not the earliest movie he did, it's Gary Cooper, Grace Kelly. I think Lon Chaney Jr. is in that. And then he did a load of TV stuff, just tons and tons of TV work. But really, he is famous for his part in here and his part, spoiler, he's in the next movie too. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which is the third movie in the Dollars trilogy. So he comes back in that, and with these movies being as famous as they are, I mean, it's not really a surprise that they are where his fame comes from. But also, he doesn't quite get the opportunity to show off in, say, Escape from New York as he does in For a Few Dollars More. So walks into town and attaches a rifle butt to his 6-shooter. This tells you two things about his character. He is a gunslinger. He can sling with the best of them. He has a 6-shooter, but he's also a really good shot. In fact, he's so concerned about his shot that he refuses to put his 6-shooter down, but he will attach a rifle butt to steady it. Seeing as everyone else is fanning from the hip anyways, I don't think it's really that big of a deal to just, if you take 2 seconds to line up and aim your gun, you'll probably be fine.
Yeah.
But this way he doesn't have to carry a rifle around to, add to his fucking ensemble. Can we talk about that for a minute? Mortimer's ensemble here. This guy wears a hat, a tie, a vest, a duster, and boots.
Yep.
I don't even like calling it a duster because that sounds cowboy. That sounds like that stuff might.
Sure.
Let me try this again. He's wearing a not really even a cowboy hat, a well-dressed.
It's a nice dress hat.
Hat of the time. So he's wearing a dress hat, a tie, a vest, let's say a short trench coat, and boots. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Somehow this is something you could get away with in the Wild West. I don't know how, but it almost makes his rifle pistol thing less absurd by comparison. What you usually see in his hand is that long-barreled pistol.
Right.
Without even having, the butt of the rifle on that, which is just as crazy. It has a barrel that it looks like one of those Acme Who Framed Roger Rabbit, pistols where the barrel of the gun is essentially also a rifle. I mean, it's going back to that concept of pistol as rifle.
Where the barrel of the gun is essentially also a flag.
It's a bang. Yeah, right. It holds a flag inside it. It's 1.5 feet long. It's ridiculous. So ridiculous character, but fucking boss character. Strolls into town, dominates everything. He's really not so much the foe of Joe's character, of Manco's character, but let's say competition, maybe. Yeah. He's the other bounty hunter.
It's not even so much competition. To go back to, I mentioned Lee Van Cleef has cat-like eyes, and he does. And they're kind of scary.
Yeah.
But to liken him to someone like the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland, I don't think is too far off. Because in this film, he's not a bad guy, but he's not a good guy. He's playing to his own ends. He's a little mischievous, and he's one step ahead of everybody else. And then he pops up, plays a little puppet show with Manco here, says, yeah, I knew you were going to come here. I don't know why you thought you were going to get ahead of me. That seems like a silly thing to assume. So go ahead, keep playing with the bandits, and I'll call you when I need you.
Yeah, he's a joke. He's a joke. No, I'm so glad you made that comparison. I just went through the sequel to American McGee's Alice, which, by the way, was great. Awesome. The original, but especially the sequel, too. Didn't get nearly the credit it was deserved. And I went back and I read, The Adventures of Alice in Wonderland. And it's a really apt comparison you make, not just for the eyes. Definitely not for the crazy smile. But yeah, he's fucking with him. It's almost amusing to him. It keeps him occupied, right? Sure. If Clint Eastwood's character is occupied, he's not getting in his way. The other thing I like about him is we spent a lot of time talking about how Joe was the protagonist, but not a good guy.
Right.
He was a terrible fucking person. And that being something really iconic about the first one that, strangely isn't talked about a whole lot. But Mortimer is, he's the good guy.
Sure, he's got righteous intentions.
He does. He's not only collecting a bounty on a criminal, which is fine, and that's that's what our other character is doing too. But he's doing it because of his sister. He's doing it as sort of not revenge, because revenge sounds cold and callous. Right. He's doing it to honor that memory, to create retribution, to
serve justice.
Yes, exactly. Serve justice. Make sure this character is off the street.
Yeah.
I just want to see Lee Van Cleef in a cleaning up the street movie. The character they're going after is El Indio, who is also known as El Hombre de Unintentionally Funny Smash Cut. So there's, I'm glad you enjoyed that. There's, you can use that, by the way. I won't sue you like the previous producer.
Yeah,
If anybody wants to take that, I'm putting it in public domain. It's all about the fucking smash cuts with him, though. It really is. Leone, God. So there's my favorite. No, I have two favorites.
Okay.
Let's say my penultimate favorite one. Bring that back too. Let's just redo all of year 3 over again. We need to go to Agua Caliente. You'll notice, by the way, my Spanish slightly better than my Japanese.
Yeah,
actually. But they cut immediately from we need to go to Agua Caliente to this is Agua Caliente. And the movie appears to have no idea that it's making a joke. They just thought, we don't need to show them wandering around on horses. That's fine. It's literally the next scene as if it's an over-the-shoulder camera, right?
Yeah.
As if you're talking to one person, then showing the other person. You're talking to one person, then you're cutting across from him to show him at Agua Caliente. That one's funny, but it doesn't even hold a candle to the smash cut to the Mad Cackle poster.
Yeah.
When they first show him and he's mad cackling, and then there's the poster, which is mad cackling. This is, right before we get the highly, highly tactful, repetitious sound effect edit between the poster and the eyes.
Oh, yeah.
And the poster and the eyes. Sound effect, sound effect. They almost start cutting each other off like you're pushing the button on a toy gun.
Right.
But once again, those fucking eyes, right? That's something you notice, especially in this, more so than, let's say, a John Carpenter affair, because you get these extreme close-ups that Leone's known for. And this late in his career, he's really starting to use a lot of that stuff. You know that it's part of his, it's the genetic makeup of his films. It's his signature. So much so that in thinking back to spaghetti westerns, you imagine that piece of his signature is just something everyone did.
Sure.
That it's part of the chemical makeup. When you have these standoffs, you have these shots of the eyes.
Right. Well, yeah, it's become part of the stereotype for the general, the Western ideology. When you think of a Western movie, spaghetti Westerns are generally the norm even before the Hollywood Westerns.
Yeah.
Hollywood Westerns, something like Rio Bravo. Mm-hmm. People don't think of that when they think of Westerns. When people think of Westerns, they think of Clint Eastwood in the desert, chewing on a cigar, staring down the guy off in the distance that he's about to fire at.
Yeah, even the scenes where, they're not directly firing, but we need the same tension that Leone brings in those scenes. Yeah, the Count of 33 bank heist scene. It's a lot of stuff on the eyes. What are the eyes looking at? What are they focusing on? Trying to put us in the same moment as the characters and bring that kind of tension when, literally we're just watching people wander around. So when I think Leone, a lot of times I think about that eyes versus eyes showdown. But, as I'm talking about things like the smash cuts or whatever, if you remember back to when we did this episode, this was really one of our first Pet the White Cat shows.
Yeah, it's true.
Before we even really knew what that was or started to do a lot of that, this was the first show where it was really one of those, we are absolutely not ready. And, you said, hey, we're ready, whatever, we're going to do this whether we're ready or not. And, watching this today and thinking back to the other kind of Pet the White Cat shows we've done, all of the We're Not Ready shows tend to end up being the Pet the White Cat shows. I love that kind of grew into that for us. So now I'm going to say one of those things that everybody on the internet disagrees with and, rolls their eyes or writes an angry letter about.
Is it about Inception?
No, it's not about Inception. Yeah, you're right. No one will write a letter about this. They're too busy still on their Inception letter writing campaign. This is my favorite of the Dollars trilogy. That's not true for a lot of people, but it's far and away true for me. And I don't even know if I can say, honestly, that it is the best one. Who's ever really to say that? But there's so much about this. So there's Mortimer first, obviously. Him, and more so Lee Van Cleef, who I just love. But he actually gets the moments he's due in this movie. That kind of treatment, the heaviness, it feels like he's a real force in this film. And he's still the same, kind of character in the next movie, but there's just so much going on. It becomes about something a little bigger. So we don't have as much time to just think about what a badass he is. But I also like the spaghetti bank heist, marrying those two kind of weird things together, especially,
that is really cool.
Looking at the modern bank heist and then the spaghetti bank heist. I love anytime we go back to noir or to westerns and we get like a train robbery or a legitimate breaking into a bank. That's fantastic. But then there's the Yojimbo thing. In Fistful of Dollars, we talked a lot about that being kind of a reimagining or blatant ripoff, depending on how you like to call that one, of the film Yojimbo. But by now, these guys have grown into their own.
Sure.
We're doing a sequel to a film that's been of dubious origin, and we can call that 100% ours. That's I love seeing what they've done with that. And then there's the score. The score is less adventurous than the other two. It doesn't feel like the kind of on a horse sunset western that you get in the very definitive first score and in the very epic third score. But this one has some really interesting kind of character to it. It has a lot of bells. It's a lot creepier. I think the best piece that I enjoy is the one at the end with the three-way Mexican standoff kind of
in the music
Mexican
box, and then it turns into the creepy organ thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it's in so they're all in that circle, and you get the bells first, and then the guitar, just the wall of sound guitar, and it plays on some of the minor stuff before the guitar actually takes a turn, and eventually the triumphant horns swell up.
Right.
The man, I don't even know if there's an organ in there, just so much as the swelling of the the guitar and then the horns.
Right.
It just sounds like this massive force. And, that's when it makes a return. It feels like a triumphant return to the score of the first movie. But it doesn't fall so much into that it can't just come back to the creepy bells at the end and just remind you of that. I could sit down and listen to that track anytime. It's great. So there is one other small note I wanted to include on here, and I can't take credit for this, unfortunately, but it seemed super important, so I wanted to talk about it. The formula of this movie is it feels a bit like one of those lazy Sunday movies we used to talk about all the time. The Tremors. We never talked about The Lost Room on this show, but I bring that up every once in a while. It's great. A lot of these movies, especially in the first couple of years, even House of a Thousand Corpses kind of had some of that feel. Stuff that you can turn on a Sunday afternoon and on TBS The Superstation. I think it's always the joke we make about that. Or who plays these like Turner Classic Movies and stuff. Does cable even exist anymore? I don't even know if any of these. It's satellite or video on demand.
I don't know.
Something.
My TV is used not to watch TV.
But long ago on Double Feature, we were really curious what made these, and we've talked a lot about the visuals and so forth. But it's been pointed out to me that this movie uses, rather than having plot, it has situations that need to be resolved. Situations, not plots, are, I think, a huge component of what makes those types of movies. The types of movies that you can put on, and then if you happen to wander out and wander back in, because you're just resolving small conflicts until your resolution at the end, I'm not going to say you don't have to pay attention, but you can miss pieces of it.
Sure.
I think the original idea here was that you go to the movie, maybe you want to go get some popcorn or something and come back. You're not afraid to miss a section of the film.
Right.
Especially when the movie is, more than 2 hours long like that, which for its time, I don't think was an exceptional length by any stretch of the imagination. But still, that adds to that feeling. I think that's part of the formula. Smaller situations being resolved, not a larger plot.
Right.
Let's talk Gamera.
All right. Well, I guess if we're going to move from smaller situations into a larger plot, really the only place we can go is giant flying space turtle.
Oh my God. What?
Giant flying space turtle.
Okay, so you gave your great primer on kaiju on that first show. It was really, I felt pretty exhaustive for what we were able to cover. I know we went mostly with the first wave, but this is the second wave, right?
This falls into the Heisei wave of kaiju.
Sure.
When we did Gojira, we talked about Showa and the whole. I mean, that was like basically Toho. Gamera came out in the Showa era.
Sure.
But we're doing the Heisei Gamera.
And this is not Toho, right? Gamera was the one that was
never a Toho. Toho's a production company. They're responsible for basically every kaiju giant monster that people know. They're
with
responsible,
the exception of this one.
Right. They're responsible for Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah. I mean, any of the...
Sure.
Except, they did some King Kong, too. I mean, basically all the giant tear down the city monsters, with the exception of giant flying space turtle.
So we decided for this show, we would start to look at a monster from the first wave, but the second wave of that monster.
Right.
Well, because by this point, this is 8 or 9 movies for Gamera?
Yeah. Well, the original series of Gamera, I think, had 8 movies.
Okay. So this is sort of a reboot.
Well, that's the thing, is when the 1980s hit, Heisei kaiju started, and it was just reboots for everything.
Yeah.
Nothing continued straight through. They rebooted Godzilla in the 80s. They rebooted... Mothra got a new reboot trilogy. Gamera got a reboot trilogy. I mean, they just started from scratch.
It's DC. It's the new 52.
Yeah, exactly. So the only thing, my only qualm with doing Gamera for this little project, the, Heisei version, the wave, is that Gamera in the Showa series is a nice guy monster.
Sure.
He has this thing where he likes to play with kids, and he's a friendly monster, and he
Sure.
fights other monsters all the
Great.
time, which they stick to. I mean, they do stick to the original Gamera. He's fighting Gyaos, which is the fucking razor bird.
Yeah.
Which is it's a monster from the original series, so they just bring everything back, and it's just bigger, and the special
That was the
effects,
population control razor
Right.
bird, right?
Yeah. But the thing that is the general truth with Heisei kaiju, especially with Godzilla and Mothra, is in the original ones, when we watch Gojira, it's still the suitmation, it's still people in costumes. They kind of shied away from CG and special effects. You know,
Sure.
it's all normal explosions and models. It's all the same basic principles. But the monsters became really mean, and they
Right.
just became forces.
Sure.
And it was just monsters tearing down cities, impersonal and impartial to human beings, and people had to kill them. That's what happened in the 80s to giant monster movies.
Well, that's always the reboot, right? It's always
Right.
the gritty, dark reboot.
Sure. Because in the 60s and 70s, they were goofy, and they would dance when they won, and people would cheer for them.
Sure,
You know what I'm talking
sure.
about?
Big American party.
Yeah, but Gamera he's still a good monster.
Sure.
At heart.
He's the guardian of the universe.
Right.
He just
And-
accidentally destroys cities once in a
Yeah,
while.
that's
No
the
biggie.
problem. When you're so big, you're forced to
Sure.
destroy these cities.
So this is from 1995 then.
This is
well
actually
into that
really
series.
late into the Heisei era.
Now, despite the fact that 1995 is currently the better part of 20 fucking years ago, this movie looks like hell.
Yeah,
it looks
it
like
looks
it's
awful.
still from the 70s, maybe the 80s, maybe
Yeah.
the 80s. But the special effects are fantastic. I mean, by the time we get to that end disaster showdown, it's impressive. I'm actually impressed by it. We've come so far since, that original Gojira.
Yeah.
The explosions are phenomenally big. I mean, they probably don't have to be because it's a lot of models and what have you.
Sure.
But they just, the frame is engulfed by these things.
Yeah. They don't hold back. I mean, you have big monsters, you have to have bigger trouble
Sure.
in Little Japan. So in this movie, this is really, really telling of Heisei kaiju. It's a lot of build up to the reveal of the monster.
Sure.
That's something we saw when we did Gojira, and that was a little inaccurate to typical Showa era kaiju because they were really excited. They knew people were just there to see the monster. By the
Celebrate
end of it,
the monster. Bring
yeah,
him
you
out
just
and
show up, monsters there,
it's a
everybody
parade.
gives it a hug. But
Yeah.
here we are, they're rebooting Gamera. They have to build it up. They have to make it this big reveal to see the creature. I'm surprised that they show the villain first. That
Yeah,
almost never
right.
happens in anything, let alone, giant monster movies.
Sure, and well, for someone not well versed with this stuff, full transparency, I've never seen a Gamera movie
Sure.
before.
Well, I don't expect you have. Most of Gamera, like most of people's Gamera experience comes from Mystery Science Theater 3000.
It's probably sad how much of the movies we do on here have wound up
So true.
on that show. Yeah, so we get these little tiny monsters when we're first starting to get the mythology, when the movie's still a strange mix of Lost and Jurassic Park.
Right.
And, I know it's a turtle. I know. We talked a little bit on the last show about it, so that's how I know. And you and I, we've been saving kaiju so much that I refuse to talk to you about kaiju outside of our show because I wanted to be really excited and
Sure.
surprised next time. So, we're going through this movie and we're getting so much of these pterodactyl things that I'm thinking, where did I get this wrong? Is it not a sea turtle? What's happening here?
And then while you have the Gyaos, the pterodactyls flying around, being jerks and causing havoc and eating buildings, then there's this other scientific team, probably unrelated,
Yeah.
who's searching for a moving atoll island that what they found in the middle of the sea, but
a
they can't
moving
really
island.
figure out the science behind.
The science in Japan doesn't have to be great. We hit them with the atomic bomb. They're all rightfully still terrified of it. It's
That's
funny
true.
that we're only a couple minutes into this movie before we're talking about atomic warfare
Yeah,
again.
they say something like it's a bomb of Nagasaki-like proportions.
Here we are decades later.
I really like the idea that Nagasaki-like is just a typical adjective for the
Oh yeah,
Japanese.
how big is it?
Also, the atomic bombing was a very solemn and terrible day for
No,
all
that's why I
mankind.
say rightfully still afraid of the atomic bomb the most. Easily one of the most fucked up things that's ever happened on planet Earth.
Next to Gamera.
This kind of allows our female lead to take charge. And I mean, she's taken a lot of charge.
Yeah.
You know, she's leading a large portion of this movie. She's usually the smartest one in the room.
Right.
Just a lot of cool. I mean, something you don't expect to see from a movie like this.
She comes off as that girl in class who was actually trying to learn while you were trying to pass.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm talking about?
Exactly.
And she's the one who, at the end of the day, everybody should know the information, and she just actually knows the information.
Yeah. She shows up and she schools you all. And in this case, much like a lot of our public education, apparently, saves our ass.
Yeah. Well, it makes you feel like an idiot.
Sure.
It makes you just... Yeah, sure. I guess I remember that.
Right, yeah, I was just going to say that. Good plan. I'm glad we came up with that together.
And we have this other thing with one of the other female leads that's... it's not characteristic. There's really never a heavy supernatural element outside of giant monsters to the kaiju movies. Gamera, like I said, he has a weird connection with children. That's just a thing with Gamera. When they, for example, when they redid Gamera again for the Millennium series, which we'll get to later when we do that show, but we're not going to do Gamera again. So it's a whole different story. It's like baby Gamera gets born and becomes psychically connected to a child that's the same age as him. I mean, Gamera has a weird connection with children, and instead of just trying to convey that in the 90s when people just want explosions, they instead go magic comma bead, and this is how she communicates with Gamera.
Well, yeah, that's really the only supernatural element. I mean, the monster is the age of the atom. It's plutonium or something. You know, it's chemicals, it's science that has created this monster. It just happens to manifest itself as if it has supernatural powers and jet engines, apparently.
And the ability to be an island.
Okay, so let's talk about Gamera then. Right?
I would love to talk about Gamera.
This is one of the things I really, really like about this movie. There are a lot of conversations about creature mythology this time around.
Yeah.
You know, we spend a lot of time talking about that. It's I love that Gamera is an island.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that they find an island and they try and figure it out, and then they find ancient mythical artifacts and see some Gamera, you know, eyeball or teeth or whatever the fuck that was under the ocean. When you have a sea creature who just takes naps in the ocean, I suppose you think it's an island. It's this great kind of misdirection. The movie, you know, you pick up on it a lot quicker than the movie thinks you're going to pick up on it. But they try and show you a little bit, some moving rocks and some other weird, bizarre stuff. But what I didn't see coming is Space Turtle.
Yeah.
What the fuck is this about?
I think it's so.
Of course you don't know because
there's
it's
no
Space
real
Turtle.
fucking answer.
No, there's no answer at all.
I think a lot of what Gamera is it's a different production company trying to compete with these monsters of the genre. I mean, just to go back to Sergio Leone, we have somebody like Sergio Corbucci who's trying to put out movies that compete with these epic fucking tales, and the only way you do that is be over the top.
Yeah, right.
You have, you know, something like Django. Yeah. You have something where you have a blind cowboy who's still the best gunslinger, or a guy who only uses a golden gun and when it's only going to be worth his time. Like, you have weird concepts.
Sure.
And I feel like Gamera is this stab to be like, we can't be more iconic than Godzilla. We can't be more strange than Ghidorah. What if we just have a creature that can do everything?
Yeah, he's a mystery, and also land, sea, air.
Right, space.
Nothing stops Gamera. But the other opportunity that Kaiju has now afforded us really twice is an excuse to talk about science and skepticism on these shows. Here we're mentioning the continent of Mu.
Right.
That is total bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's Mu, not Mew. Like I'm fairly certain that's how it's pronounced. It doesn't matter anyways, because it doesn't fucking exist. But Mu is sort of the sister to Atlantis.
Okay.
It's brought up in the movie in kind of conjunction with Atlantis when they're just throwing out names of all these continents that obviously existed at one point, but then sunk into the ocean. And it's a really great kind of pseudoscience to look at because it's not talked about enough due to how overwhelmingly laughable it is.
Yeah.
And how few people actually believe in it. It's not threatening, but it falls into the camp of, hey, fun pseudoscience.
Sure.
That we can, if you're just a fan of pseudoscience, not because it angers you, but you find it, quaint and amusing,
right.
Then Atlantis is the kind of thing that you would be amused by. Atlantis itself was created as a fable by Plato. That's a good case to look at because it didn't even start as a hoax. Plato wrote a thing in which some characters are having a conversation, and as a kind of allegory or anecdote or what have you, they come up with this fictional thing called Atlantis. So it's almost fiction within fiction. And then people look at it now and go, well, Plato wrote about it. It exists because no one's fucking read the actual thing he wrote. Mu, however, was a lost continent, which was once thought to be where Egyptians and the Mayans came from. And by once thought, I literally mean just once in the 1800s by one lone nut job. I mean, there were, there's a couple people. Obviously,
sure.
There's never one.
It sounds a lot like Stargate.
It is kind of like Stargate. No, it's more like Hollow Earth theory. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's just people with a vast misunderstanding of any kind of physics or geology who essentially just pull ideas out of their butts, and that's part of the theory then.
Sure.
There's no founding, not even in science, but anywhere at all. They just they start with their conclusion and then attempt to find things to validate it. The idea was really popularized in the 1920s. It was the, I believe, writer and professional fisherman, James Churchwood,
okay,
who basically wouldn't let go of the idea, would go on and on about this to anyone who would listen. But he wrote this book about it, which is just all sorts of nut job, just all sorts of it. So here's the thing with lost continents, right? With the idea that a continent just, I don't know, sunk into the ocean and who cares how it sunk into the ocean? It just fell in there, and one day maybe it'll rise back up, and maybe all the Mayans left in, I don't know, boats to form a Mayan civilization. That's fine. They talk about continental drift, which is a real thing, which is
sure.
absolutely a real thing. But continental drift takes hundreds of millions of years.
Yeah.
And considering the time that humans have existed, it takes much longer than that. In fact, it takes roughly hundreds of millions of years longer than that. But even then, when we do that very simple math, that land, let's pretend it did disappear, it has to go somewhere.
Right.
Right? It doesn't just fall into the ocean. I mean, when continents break up like that, when you have pieces of land that do eventually chip off or what have you, they form islands. So the idea that it actually sank is fucking preposterous. It defies everything we know about physics. But unlike a normal pseudoscience that's often disputed by, a single claim, a single branch of science, there is one good solid reason that it can't exist. This is one where archaeology and geology compete to see who can make lost continents look more foolish. Is it because humans haven't been around as long as this would take to happen? Or is it because that mass just wouldn't sink into the fucking ocean? So for the third time today, the end.
Awesome. Cool. We have a website. That's doublefeatureshow.com. If you want to go there, and a lot of what I said personally about kaiju, which I didn't even specify means giant monster movie, you could type it in. And then you can go back to our the other show.
Sure.
With Fistful Dollars and Gojira. And then we have an email where if you're just too confused about the website, that's doublefeatureshow@gmail.com.
So coming up next, we have show number 200.
Show number fucking 200.
We've been working for quite a while
For 200 weeks.
to understand David Lynch.
Oh.
So we're going to do the movie Freaks, right?
That's not a David Lynch movie.
I know, it's not, but I'll get there.
Okay.
No, it's not. Freaks is the first movie. And the David Lynch movie is obvious. We've been building up to this
true.
David Lynch movie for a long time. They've been getting more and more surreal. we're going to hit the pinnacle. I mean, if you don't know what we're talking about, you can doublefeatureshow.com and it'll tell you what movies next time. But the David Lynch one is obvious. The other one we're going to do is the movie Freaks, which could be a little hard to get a hold of. I want to say it's from the 30s.
Yeah.
And we're going to pop that one on the show too.
Watch more fucking film.
Bye. So-called Man with No Name trilogy, although we'll dispel that even further this time around, which is Clint Eastwood, right?
Right.
It's the Clint Eastwood that isn't Dirty Harry. But once again, he's not actually the man with no name here.
No.
He is, I think it's Manco.
The man with Manco name.
I mean, it's so poorly dubbed. The English is just terrible. But they obviously call him Manco. This isn't a big secret. Oh, look, I found a character accidentally said his... No, I mean, they call him Manco. It's, pretty widely known. It's translates to, it's something about his one arm, right? It's what you would say about someone who only can use one arm. And he does everything with one arm and gunslings with his other arm, which I don't know how that helps him build up muscle and reflexes, but it's probably why Mortimer is ultimately a better and faster shot. Well, we'll get to that though. So this is another interesting litigious movie for Sergio Leone.
Yeah.
He gets together with Clint Eastwood and he creates the original Fistful of Dollars with their producer at the time. And we talked about the Dollars trilogy and the legality and Yojimbo and all of that stuff on the first one. So I'm not going to mention anything from the first one. You can go back to that show, Fistful of Dollars and Gojira. So the producer and Sergio Leone, after the first movie, have this big falling out, right? He separates, Leone does, and he decides, I'm going to do another one of these movies. And then, of course, the producer sues him because the producer says, oh, that's the man with no name or whatever. That's Joe. That's my character. I should get some of this money. And so Leone does the same fucking thing he did for Yojimbo. He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not the same character. Yeah. This is a totally different guy. And so they take him to court, and the court decides, when you read about their decision, ultimately what they came to is that, the character's kind of a public domain. He's a legend. Which is really funny, public domain. It sounds like, in my head, I see the court with two children arguing over whose character it is, and the court just kind of goes, I don't know what you're talking about. It's just some guy with a poncho. This could be anybody.
This is a
Doesn't
cowboy.
Even matter. Yeah.
You're not allowed to trademark a cowboy.
Yeah, they basically said your character is so flat and so cliche that he's public domain.
I'm sorry, your peg leg, eye patch, bearded pirate cannot be copyrighted.
Right. It's Jack Sparrow being copywritten, right? But that seems so cruel too. I don't think this character is such a cliche, and even if he is here, and that just never happened. But that was early in year 3, and this is toward the end of year 4, and we managed to sneak it in. So although it seems like it's been an absurdly long time, when you technically look at the different series of the show we have, we fit it in the next year.
Yeah. So it's not our fault. We've done a great job, and we're stellar hosts of Double Feature.
So there's going to be spoilers in this show, and then you're going to think we're not doing a great job because we ruined movies for you. So as light on spoilers as a show like For a Few Dollars More and Gamera, Guardian of the Universe might actually be, as you like to point out, everything can in fact be spoiled.
That's true.
So how do you not want to watch these? This sounds like a great use of an afternoon.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
In fact, we watched them, and it was a great use of an afternoon. Why don't we start the same way we did last time with For a Few Dollars More? This is perfect because I was so in the mood for a Western today.
Yeah.
I always forget I'm in the mood to watch spaghetti Westerns.
Yeah.
And they start, but this was a rare occasion where I showed up in the studio today and I desperately wanted to see a spaghetti Western. And this was just perfect for it. So this is the second one in the Dollars trilogy.
Right. The Man with No Name trilogy.
It's only because they, popularized. It's the fucking Dollars trilogy. It's the most popular of its kind. But it does kind of add to that weird Django thing where characters sort of public domain. Everybody just kind of does the same Western thing. And then the title almost becomes a jab at the previous, for a few dollars more.
Right.
It's a joke. It says, hey, we won. We're going to capitalize on that thing, and fuck you guys. So Joe, you like that? I'm going to call him Joe now. That's
Joe,
fine.
Yeah.
Joe comes back in true form. He's shooting Mortimer's hat around.
Shooting apples off trees.
I know, right?
Yeah. No, the hat shooting scene.
The hat shooting's the best because they're just fucking children.
Yeah.
It's go pick up your hat, shoot it, flies away.
Fine. I will go pick up my hat.
Yeah, right. Up, shot it again, flew away.
Fine. I'm going to pick it up, and then I'm going to shoot your hat all at once and show you that I'm just as good.
Take that, asshole.
Don't
it's a
be
pissing
baby.
contest. That's exactly what it is. That's one of my favorite scenes in this, though, for as much as it takes these characters that I like to think are strong, manly men and then goes, oh, they're being silly. I love the nighttime shot, and it just seems like it would have been fun to film that day.
Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
My name is Eric, and I'm returning to true form with Michael Kester.
No, it's double feature.
I don't know what that means. True Form is not the name of the show. Is that where you were?
Sorry.
Oh, Jesus. We have 2 movies on the show that we promised to get back around
Yeah,
to.
and honestly, I forgot, and then I just thought we weren't going to do it.
Oh, I remembered.
I got a couple emails.
Yeah, there were some emails. So this is great. So tell me what these 2 movies are.
Today we're doing For a Few Dollars More and Gamera, Guardian of the Universe.
So we did a show that was A Fistful of Dollars and Gojira.
Yes.
Which fit much better in your iTunes. You came up with this master plan on that show that we could do, these other phases of kaiju with the other Leone stuff.
Right.
And we both said, great idea. In fact, I believe at the time we said, great idea. Let's try and cram that into this